Welcome to The Green Rush, a podcast about cannabis, business, culture, and, well, today, the law. Ann and Lewis speak with two of the nation's most noted cannabis attorneys. Marc Ross, a New York-based lawyer with Sichenzia Ross Ference. Marc not only counsels market participants in New York, but also created the first law school course on the legal cannabis industry at Hofstra Law School. Benson has a vast range of experience in the cannabis industry, which includes litigation support, providing M&A services, conducting due diligence, and assisting cannabis businesses with state and local licensing. Now, on to the conversation.
Welcome to The Green Rush. I'm Louis Goldberg here with Ann Donahoe, my little jar of joy. Today, we are doing something a bit different. We are having two guests on at the same time instead of one. It's kind of like a dog pile of a cannabis conversation.
Aren't you all lucky?
So at the heart of today's cannabis industry are state laws. With the absence of federal guidelines, businesses are relying on state, regional, and even local laws to run their businesses. And today we are talking with two attorneys on opposite coasts, but all in the same cannabis industry. In the western corner of our ring, we have Benson Lau with the Lau Law Firm, which is a bit of a tongue twister. Benson's based in Los Angeles. He works with clients who are looking to obtain licenses, stay in compliance, transition from the black market to the legit green market, and he does due diligence for investors. And in the eastern corner, we've got Marc Ross, a founding partner of Sichenzia Ross Ference Kesner in New York. Marc doesn't just do the law, he teaches it as well, having just finished his fourth year teaching the business of law and marijuana as an adjunct professor at Hofstra University Law School. Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that little subscribe button up there on your iTunes or on your Stitcher for The Green Rush, or wherever you're listening to us. And if you can leave us a rating or a comment, we would really be grateful. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at KCSA_cannabis.com or just dot.
There's no dot in our handle.
It's at KCSA Cannabis. It says a dot here, and I'm like reading the script and whatever. All right, guys, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
So Benson is actually a graduate of Hofstra Law. So you guys have that in common. And Benson said that if you, Marc, were teaching that course when he was there, he definitely would have signed up for it.
I do have to tell you, it is one of the more popular courses in the school, much to
I can imagine.
Dean's chagrin.
Oh, yeah. I definitely attended some of your some classes taught by your colleague. Is Professor Colasanti still there? I was in a securities law class.
I love that we're playing Hofstra family and friends here. Yeah.
This is the legal form of Jewish geography.
Yeah, Hofstra geography. So let's dive in. Practicing law in this industry has to be really one of the thorniest specialties. Can you both just briefly give an overview of how you got into this industry and why is it that you just chose this path? Marc, we'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. About 6 years ago, me and my firm, we do a lot of corporate law, and we help companies, public and private companies, raise money. That's a big part of what we do. And we have 50 lawyers today at the firm. 6 years ago, a client of mine had asked me to take a due diligence trip out to Colorado because they were raising money for a cannabis company. I told them I didn't believe in it. I had no interest in doing it. And they said, no, they're serious. And I said, well, I am serious too. And then they said the three words every lawyer likes to hear: I'll pay you. And I went to visit the facility in Colorado, and candidly, I was blown away. I couldn't believe how impressive the industry was, how much promise the industry had. And since then, I represent a lot of companies, public and private companies in the space. And about 4 years, as I said, as you said, 4 years ago, I was teaching the first class in the country at a law school in the business and law of marijuana at Hofstra School of Law in New York. And I've just gotten more and more involved with it, and I'm intrigued by it. I think it's fascinating.
Benson, what about you?
Well, I started my career as a litigator, primarily in the entertainment sector out here in Los Angeles. And it just kind of happened happened. I didn't really plan on practicing in this space, but we had a client one day who's one of the original pre-ICO dispensary owners in Los Angeles. And we started doing some transactional work for him. And through that, it just sort of blossomed into this separate, practice area of our firm. And that's kind of how I got into it. So it's not necessarily I chose this industry. It's kind of like
chose you.
Chose me. Kind of fell in my lap.
So, Benson, California seems to, well, not seems to be, California is ahead of New York in terms of legalization, specifically around adult use. We're seeing a lot of issues, though, in the state on trying to root out black market operators. There's still the vast majority of the entire industry is still black market. It's not in the light yet. Earlier this year, the Bureau of Cannabis Control, or the BCC, in California issued hundreds of cease and desist letters. Have some of your clients been swept up in that? Have you had to deal with guys who are both legal and illegal, or illegal guys trying to get to legal? I mean, what are you seeing there? And more importantly, how are you advising them?
Fortunately, many of my clients were pre-existing commercial operators. As such, I have assisted them in obtaining the requisite temporary approvals. A common mistake I see happening in the industry, especially when it comes to new investors coming in, is that people are conflating these temporary approvals with actual licensing. A lot of businesses will tout that, oh yeah, we are licensed, to be a marijuana retailer, when in reality, all they have is this temporary approval from the Bureau of Cannabis Control, which allows them to operate while their application is pending. So it's so in terms of who I've been representing, it's either operators that have been in operations prior to, or people that are just starting off that want to make sure they have all their ducks in a row. When I guess licensing opens up for those people, they're ready to submit all the requisite paperwork they need to obtain obtain the license. But in terms of, I guess, the people that have received the cease and desist letter, my advice would be to cease and desist, because the reason being, if you want to be in this space and you receive that letter, and you continue operating, one of the grounds for denial of a license will be violations of any regulations. So you run the risk that you'll be prohibited from operating in this industry if you continue to do so.
So because you get a cease and desist letter, you comply by whatever the letter states, but you can then go back and try to get back in compliance and become a compliant operator again, right? That's not, just because you get that letter doesn't mean that you're blackballed, right?
Yes. There is an opportunity to apply for licensure. However, and this is where it gets this is where implementation of legalization in California has become a bit of a mess. Majority of local jurisdictions don't have regulations in place yet to allow for local approval of their business. And in California, you need both local approval, and a state license in order to be legally compliant. And you can't get state licensure without local approval. You can't apply for a state license without getting a local license. That's putting the cart before the horse. And the reason, and local law controls. This arises from the general premise that cities have the police power to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of its residents. So only 1 in 5 jurisdictions right now in California allow some form of commercial cannabis activity. A majority of them don't. And that's been an obstacle that a lot of new startups are facing right now, is where can we operate?
So this brings up the question that New York seems to be hurtling towards legalization, right? Governor Cuomo, has data coming out that he's requested. The New York's Democratic State Party put legalization into the party platform. So, Marc, what are the lessons if you were in Governor Cuomo's ear right now saying, look, we got to start writing the regulations, and you were looking at the other regulations, whether they be in Nevada or California, what lessons would you be whispering into the governor's ear right now?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, the lesson is economics. I think I would start with the jobs, and I start with the tax revenues. In the country by 2020, it is expected there will be more jobs in cannabis than in manufacturing. California, which has just recently come online and been live, they expect tax revenues of about $1 billion. So I would suggest to the governor that, those are two important items for any economy, including this state. And I would suggest you figure out how best to embrace that.
Are there regulations? I mean, you're looking at from a regulatory perspective, though. Are there things that you're looking at California going, they still didn't get that right? Or you're looking at the laws and the regs in Massachusetts going, they didn't get that right. Like, are there things that you would be piecemealing together, or maybe that's not your gig, and you'd say to the governor, I don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, I think two things. I think the first thing is everybody's very fortunate to have had Colorado go first, and Colorado made all the mistakes that people are learning, the other states are learning from. Mm-hmm. So certainly Colorado had issues with the packaging, had issues with the percentages contained on the items. So I think all of those items have been addressed, and they're all being addressed. So I'm not as concerned with the implementation in the state as I am and I spend most of my time advising companies, many of which are public companies, and, how they should disclose and how they should address in their public filings these cannabis-related issues. So, I think you can figure out, the regulations can be implemented. That's not a big concern. The question really is the willingness to do it.
So, Benson, can we ask you the same question, but just in reverse? So, if you, having practiced in a state with adult use and seeing the regulations up close from a state, local, and regional level, what advice would you give Governor Cuomo and say, you got to make sure you don't do this because we're stuck here, or make sure you do this because this is just going to be more efficient? I guess if you had coffee with Cuomo, what would you say? Or a drink, or a joint, or whatever.
A different podcast, Coffee with Cuomo.
Hey, Andy, call us.
He got promoted, too. His brother just got promoted to his own show on CNN, so maybe you can hook into that.
Primetime show, yeah. So, Benson, what would you say to the governor right now?
My advice would be to, prior to any statewide implementation of, commercial cannabis regulations, to make sure that the local jurisdictions are prepared for it. It's going to require the local governments and the state government to sort of work together to make sure they're in sync. Otherwise, they'll run into the problems that California is facing right now, with many jurisdictions having complete moratoriums where no cannabis activities allowed to be conducted, and it's created a lot of
well, it gives you business, right?
Yeah, it gives us business, but it's uncertainty is not good in a industry that's sort of looking for legitimacy here.
So
see, I think the point to the Benson is that you're not going to necessarily have coordination, because in California, and we talked about this in my class, in California you have some towns that don't want cannabis.
Yeah.
So and they have, depending upon how it's phrased, they have the right to prevent that from happening. So I think, my whole position is you want a general buy-in on the state level, but you're not going to have all the local people buying into it, and that's okay.
That's certainly true. But also in terms of, I guess, for example, let's take Los Angeles. California is the world's largest cannabis market, and in the world's largest cannabis market, the largest city is Los Angeles. Right now, licensing is being handled by the Department of Cannabis Regulations in the city of LA, and they had plans to issue licenses in 3 phases. Phase 1 was for pre-existing cannabis dispensaries. Phase 2 would be your social equity applicants, and then Phase 3 is for the general public. Phase 2 was slated to begin on March 1st and conclude on April 1st. As of today's date, that has not occurred yet. And as of today's date, I think the last time I checked, they had 4 full-time employees on staff processing literally thousands of applications. So even though certain towns and local jurisdictions can outright prohibit commercial cannabis activity, as is their right to, at least at the state level, they should ensure that, localities such as large jurisdictions such as Manhattan or like here, Los Angeles, have regulations and the framework in place needed to make it as smooth as possible.
I know that the de Blasio administration's already starting to think about that they are preparing for New York. And I think that they're looking at cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco that have had real problems with resistance at the local level, and then also and just getting it wrong. So hopefully New York will get it right. Marc, you said you teach a course on cannabis law, and you're the first professor to do it. Tell us that moment where you walked into the dean and said, "Hey, I've got an idea for you." How did that pitch go?
Like a lead balloon. Actually, at that time, the dean was very intrigued by it because today everybody's looking for the edge and how they would do it. And certainly is a ripe area. And it certainly has a lot of intrigue. They were very reluctant until I told them at Harvard, another school that begins with an H and has a law school also, teaches some class on accounting for cannabis. And that seemed to give it some comfort. And then they made me write a curriculum. And then after that, once I passed the curriculum committee, they put it out to vote to the faculty. And, candidly, it was very warmly received. People were very concerned about it. But it turned out to be a great class,
and one of the more popular ones I can imagine on campus.
I capped my class at 25, and every year I have 50 on the wait list.
Wow. So, Benson, part of what you're hired to do is due diligence for investors. And you were telling me some of the more sordid stories of how people are being approached for quote unquote investment opportunities, over Facebook and Twitter, and which is just icky, but in general. But what should investors be looking out for? And what have you counseled some of these clients, when it comes to investing?
In a new space such as this, there's a lot of opportunity out there for fraudsters. And what a common mistake I've seen, which I mentioned earlier, are people that are conflating temporary approvals with actual licensure. And investors relying upon that and investing significant sums of money just in a business that only has temporary approval. Temporary approval only allows you to operate for a period of 120 days while your application is pending. And if it's still pending, it's renewed for an additional 90 days. But there's, always that chance that it's not going to be licensed. The other would be to pay attention to zoning restrictions at the local level. A lot of people are going by, what's required by the state, which is 600 foot. You can't have commercial cannabis activity operating within 600 feet of a school, a daycare, or youth center. And, because local law controls many jurisdictions, I use Los Angeles for an example, theirs is 750 feet, and it's not just limited to schools, it's also inclusive of public libraries, public parks, alcohol and drug rehab facilities, and permanent supportive housing. So it's, when in doubt.
Or get out a map.
Or I'll use an anecdote. One of the worst, I had a situation where a client approached me about a potential investment in a cannabis dispensary located by the University of Southern California. Already, that raised a red flag. They sent me an address for the proposed space. And, without going on the city's zoning site and running any search, I just went on Google Maps. I was able to find that within a block of that location was an elementary school. So even the most do at least the most cursory due diligence, because there's, and then these people are saying we'll be licensed, we'll be up and running by the end of July. Anyone that's familiar with the logjam that's currently, being that is currently at the Department of Cannabis Regulations in LA knows that's not possible because phase 3, much less phase 2, hasn't even begun yet for licensing. So, it's always important to be vigilant, and, do your due diligence. And there's a lot of free resources available out there from these licensing boards, such as the Bureau of Cannabis Control or the California Department of Food and Agriculture, which regulates cultivation, or the California Department of Public Health, which regulates manufacturers. You can sign up on these email lists that they have online, and
we'll put links in the show notes to all these places.
Anytime there's a change in the law, and there are changes because currently there are no regulations. California is still under its emergency regulations, so changes can happen at any moment. So it's important to just be vigilant.
So, Marc, you're on the other side of this, right? You've built your career working with public companies and companies that want to go public and dealing with institutional investors. And can you talk about what your experience has been on that side and whether you're a company looking to raise money, what you should look out for from shady institutions, or on the other side, you're an investor, how to kind of think through some of the challenges of investing in today's cannabis market?
Sure. I mean, I think from the perspective of, from an investor's perspective, I think you need to really vet out these companies. It's kind of concerning when Benson says someone wants to put up a dispensary there and, they didn't bother realizing that's right next to a school. I don't do that much with dispensaries, but I think, that some people would say that's indicative of some people in the industry. I think the industry is maturing a lot, and I think we're getting away from more of those instances. A lot of the public companies that I represent have been raising all kinds of money, cannabis money in the industry. There's a lot of funds that are set up for it. I mean, if you're public, you have access to the public markets. We've been very active in helping these companies gain access, raise money. As long as you have good management and you have a good plan in there, and just like any other public company, you can implement your plan. I think there is capital there for you, and we've been very successful in helping our clients raise that capital.
Yeah, but I'm sure you've seen some really shitty business plans or management that's clearly, they're not on the up and up. Are there some, on the investor side, are there some things that you should look out for? Like, he's got 2 different colored shoes on, you can't invest in him. Like, is there, seriously though, are there things that you could identify on either side that would give somebody warning?
I mean, look, Louis, you've been in the space of representing public companies, working with public companies for many years. I've been in the space for over probably close to 30 years, talking to public companies. When you meet with them, you have to listen to them and you have to see what they're saying add up. If they have a business plan that doesn't make sense, guess what? It probably doesn't make sense. If when you meet with them and they sound like a little sketchy, I met with someone recently who turned around and said how he's going to open a rec shop. He wants to raise money, become a public company, and open a rec shop in New York. I said, okay, thank you. Have a nice day, because you can't have recreational marijuana in New York. It didn't take me long to realize he had no idea what he's talking about. Certainly, when you sit down and, it's like anything else, when you're doing due diligence and you're meeting with the clients and you're listening to them and you're doing background checks on them, I think you'll learn a lot. So as an investor, I think you have to be even more concerned, and your tentacles have to be up more in the marijuana space, because there are people who are sketchy. But candidly, that's true of a lot of spaces.
So Benson, I have you kind of say you walked or backed into this space, that you weren't planning to get into cannabis. Has there been something that you've learned that absolutely blew your mind? Like, this is the dumbest piece of regulation I've ever seen, or this is really brilliant. Like, thank God for this. Like, has there these moments that your eyes have opened?
Well, one thing I find that is, I think it's stupid, is the fact that there are licensed businesses. My clients pay taxes, both federal and state, that can't open bank accounts, and that's because of the Federal Controlled Substances Act, and I think that the fact that having access to basic banking needs is something that's necessary in the industry, and that it just befuddles me. If you want to, eliminate the black market, I think that's a great first step to take, to eliminate all these, just all cash transactions from the space.
Well, it's even more interesting, Louis, because if you think about it, if you're a public company, and that's a lot of these companies that I represent, in their risk factors, many of them articulate not only that they are potentially violating federal law, but they also could lose and have lost their bank account many times. I mean, I have clients of mine, and these are public companies. So you're a public company, you have to run it, and your bank calls you up and says, we don't want your deposits anymore. So just to kind of embellish what Benson is saying, that certainly is an untenable situation.
So, there are hundreds now of public cannabis companies, and if they trade in the U.S., they are on the OTC marketplace. And the OTC tends to have a lot of companies that either shouldn't be public because they don't understand the controls, or they shouldn't be public because the management is really in this for the wrong thing. Are you seeing that same type of dynamic, either of you guys? But Mark, you go first. Develop in the cannabis space, that there are a lot of these public companies that really just shouldn't be public.
That's true. But again, and for the record, there is one cannabis company on the New York Stock Exchange, and there's one cannabis company on NASDAQ. But yes, the vast majority of them are on the OTC markets, and certainly some of them shouldn't be public. And why they are public, or now that they are public, how they have to address it. Those are the clients that I often spend my time talking with and trying to help them. But certainly there's a lot of companies that maybe they shouldn't be public, and I can speak to them in advance and say whether it does make sense for you to go public or it doesn't make sense for you to go public.
I mean, the only reason I ask is cannabis stocks are hot, and helping an investor, a retail, an unsophisticated investor, wade through and not teaching them how to read a balance sheet, but like how to wade through the bullshit, because a lot of these companies spit out BS press releases, and they're pump and dump schemes. Or is there like something that you might, if your mother said to you, Mark, I want to invest in this company, is there one or two things that you could point to and say, that's a bad idea, or that's a yes?
Well, I think the question is, it's like anything else. What's the industry? If you're a public company and you own a dispensary, is that really a good model? On the other hand, cannabis is broken down to touching the plant and not touching the plant. Mm-hmm. Okay, the ancillary businesses are the ones that don't touch the plant. Those have a lot of excitement to people, where you can get the pop, if you will, from the cannabis, but still not be exclusively cannabis. And I think that has a lot of attraction, because in certain situations, if federal law starts getting enforced, which I don't see it happening, and you become and cannabis is cut down, you're certainly higher up on the chain, and not within the eyes of the government. So I think in terms of things that I would look at how robust is the business. If you have sales of light bulbs or sales of other ancillary items, I think that's a very promising aspect. Or if you have a substantial production facility.
So thank you guys for joining us. I think that's a great place for us to wrap up. And before we go, we do a segment every show called Puff Puff Pass, where we ask you guys to tell us in rapid succession 2 things you love about the industry and 1 thing that absolutely drives you bonkers. Benson, want to go first?
Sure. Yes, 2 things I like about the industry. One is I think that it's headed in the right direction. I understand that we're experiencing some growing pains right now, but those are kind of necessary evils that I believe in the long run is going to help the industry overall. The second thing I like about the industry, I guess, is that I like my clients that are in this space. No offense to my litigation clients, but my cannabis clients are a lot less stressed out. And,
wonder why.
Easier to deal with. Probably because they're not getting sued or being sued. But something I hate about the industry, again, it's the whole access to banking. And it's not just for those that touch the plant too. Touching on what Mark said, there's ancillary businesses that are affected by that also. And I just remember that we had a client once that engages in leasing grow equipment to cannabis businesses. They don't touch the plant. All they do is lease equipment, and they had their accounts. They had to move their accounts. A significant amount of accounts had to be closed down and moved at the drop of a hat. So
I was just at a grow in Colorado, and a friend of mine told me that when he lost his last account, they called him up and said, you have to come in. I have a $287,000 cashier's check for you. You can't bank here anymore.
Ouch.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, help.
Did you take the check, Louis? All right, so I'll puff and pass also. So my first puff, the thing I like about the industry is I think it's a phenomenal industry. It has amazing potential, and I think it's since the internet, I think this is the next billion-dollar industry that's looking us in the eye without question. The second thing I really like about it is, the tax revenue basis. You can solve so many of the societal cures just by taxing it. California alone, which is the 6th largest economy in the world, anticipates $1 billion a year of tax revenue. That's something that everybody can use and deploy. The thing I don't like about the industry is the uncertainty. As a business attorney, which I am, you need certainty. Businesses try to predict. Businesses try to understand. When Jeff Sessions ripped up the Cole Memorandum on January 4th, it sent the industry in tremors. Again, more uncertainty. Part of the banking issues that Benson mentioned, that's all uncertainty. Some banks take you have to wonder, are you going to be thrown out of the bank?
Mm-hmm.
So that certainly is very, very damaging, and it's very unsettling to anyone as it relates to the industry.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We've been chatting with Marc Ross and Benson Lau, both practicing attorneys in cannabis. All of their contact info and some of the links we talked about today will be included in our show notes. We hope you enjoyed the discussion today. If you did, let us know. Subscribe to the podcast, and we would love a rating. And feel free to reach out to us. We're at KCSA_cannabis. I think Louis fudged that in the beginning. At KCSA_cannabis on both Twitter and Instagram. And send us a note if you want to. greenrush@kcsa.com. Bye for now.